Okay, well, you know what? It's noon, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, T-Birds, and happy Friday. Uh, Welcome to another edition of Friday Career Connections, where we get together as a community to learn about how we can build better careers. We bring in a variety of guests, and we're super excited about our guest today, John Kennedy. He was referred to us by Brenda Christensen, who's on our team. And John and I met, it's been a few weeks, but I was really fascinated by how you got to where you are in neuroplasticity, as well as the work you've done with SUU and some of the results. And this forum is really focused on how we develop our careers. So we're really interested to hear about your work and how you arrived where you are in your career, but also how can our students or anybody really use this technique that you've developed to really develop skills in a career outcome and career outcomes. I know it's a tough job market right now, and sometimes it's hard to stay positive. And I'm just really curious to hear some of your thoughts on that. But
Yeah,
John, I don't want to steal your thunder, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself and your journey, and then talk about some of your methods and techniques that have helped others to achieve their goals. So
yeah,
I'll turn it over
absolutely.
to you.
Thank you, thank you. So John Kennedy, obviously neuroplastician, that's the title that actually the Marines gave me when I developed my program. So kind of back up a bit. For about 20 years, I was a consultant to the C-level of really large corporations, so Motorola and Aon. I kind of had a specialty niche. If they had a problem, a project that was out of control, they'd bring me in and try to fix it. And I loved doing that, led a lot of teams, doing a lot of things, helped a lot of coaches. I coached and advised a lot of business people as well, which I still love to do. And then in 2006, my brother came back from Iraq. And at the time, the biggest threat to our military in combat were IEDs, improvised explosive devices. And I thought maybe this is a chance to, it kind of inspired me, save lives instead of just making companies more money. And long story short, I got an opportunity with the Marine Corps, which is where I really developed this program. The goal was twofold. One, and I think this directly applies to students as well and anyone in life, but the two goals are one, make better decisions under pressure and under stress, right? So obviously, combat is the most stressful, but we all are in stressful situations where we have to make decisions. No one's shooting at us, right? But still. And then on the other end of the spectrum was to help recover from the wounds of war. So everything from depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, and so forth. And the program is the only one of its kind in the world, according to the military, and it helps both ends of those spectrums by targeting the core processing ability of the brain. Basically, I took the same methodology I used to help businesses and I applied it to the brain and used neuroplasticity, which is this incredible capability God's given our brain to change from repetition. And when we repeat something, we get better at it. We think of that as muscle memory if you're an athlete. The mind level of that is psychology. So there's a lot of powerful programs, mindset and positive mental attitude and stuff. And there's a lot of psychologists that help with that, but it doesn't happen right away. It takes a little bit of time. And that's the operating system of our brain. And where my program targets is the processor. So if you get a new computer, everything works better on your computer. And so it's been a journey. So since those original Marines, I trained Navy SEALs and snipers and pilots. And now in the civilian sector, I get to work with a lot of businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people working in companies, developers, salespeople. And at the same time, on the other end of the spectrum, people with autism, ADHD, emotional issues. We've been able to help just about everybody improve their performance. And I'm kind of excited for your audience, right? Because you're a lot of your audience, they have a job, they're trying to get a degree, right? They're juggling family, they're juggling so many different things. And the key to be successful at that really is mental agility. And that's one of the things this program helps is improve mental agility. So no matter what situation you're in, you can make better decisions without stress. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell. I've always trying to, and I would encourage all the people listening here is where, always be flexible, right? So you have a goal, a job or whatever, and be flexible, take in as much information as you can so that as a situation, we know there's a lot of things out there in the marketplace now, right? AI is encroaching some areas. You've got changing job requirements. So I want them always to be positive, but one key to being successful in that, it really is mental agility.
John, that's fascinating. How have you made the journey like educationally? Like what's your formal training versus things that you just taught yourself or you just learned on your own?
Yeah, so that's kind of, I'm a bit of an anomaly that way. So actually, all the skills that I try to put in my initial program are kind of where I came up with. So I grew up in a small town in New York. My high school years were the most informative for me because I lived in Japan, Tokyo, Japan, with a school of 50 different nationalities, 200 kids. I still keep in touch with those guys years later. But any kind of environment where you're enriching yourself in a lot of different ways is really good for your brain. When I started my first business, I don't know if I could say this, but I actually left school early to start my first business. I was taking senior level classes at Westminster College, which not the one you guys play up in Salt Lake, but this is another Westminster in Missouri. And I decided I want to do something different. So I started my first business in energy conservation. I built the world's first handheld computer that would measure energy efficiency. I worked with architects, and then that computers just led me. So I managed restaurants. I started consulting. I did a lot of computer training. One of my problems, I get bored easy, right? So I like to solve problems. So I went from one thing to another to another. But that's been very, very helpful for me because the challenge, I like to take on challenges. The core is always around process. If we can make a process more efficient, it improves everything else that we do. And I've been able to, fortunately, be able to work with so many really talented people. And I always try to learn. That's another thing, your students, learn from wherever you are, right? One of the things I keep telling my daughter was always, nothing's a waste of time if you learn from it. So if you have something and it seems like a failure, you don't give up. You just take what you learned from that and use it to bring you on to the next level. Um, Now, on the other scientific side, I've had many neuroscientists help me with this program, which has been amazing. So I've learned so much from them. Um, so life is kind of a constant learning experience. And I think that's another thing that everybody needs to keep in mind is that if you fail, you just bounce up, keep going, take what you learn, apply it to the next situation, and always look for those changes to keep doing what you feel you're meant to do, but you never know where you're going to end up. Steve Jobs in his famous speech said, you can only connect the dots looking backwards, right? So again, that's so encouraging. If we look at how far we are from where we want to be, it can get discouraging. But if you look back over how you got to where you are right now, sometimes that feels pretty good when you look at all the challenges you've had to overcome to get where you are now.
Yeah. So tell us why Westminster, Missouri is famous. Westminster University.
Yeah.
What in
Yeah.
history happened there? I've been there many times.
Yeah. That's the gym where I played basketball in. That's where Winston Churchill gave his famous Iron Curtain speech. So very, very important part in history. They have a Winston Churchill Museum, which is amazing. So that was a great, great culture there in that school.
Yeah, in
So,
the middle of Missouri, there's this old English church
yep,
was transferred
Christopher
over
Wren.
brick by brick, and that is where Winston Churchill gave his Iron Curtain speech.
Yeah,
That's fun.
yeah.
So, John, what would you tell someone, and with all the athletes that you've worked with and the techniques that you've developed, someone who is trying to find a job in a tough job market and who's discouraged and is just thinking there are no jobs out there, or um, AI is going to take my job. How do you mentally deal with that kind of environment or that kind of attitude?
Well, one other thing, and again, my program works at a very core level. Now, one thing that your students need to know is that you're the only school in the entire country that has my program as part of your online learning program, which I think is brilliant, right? So that it's online. Combat Brain Training Program. I think Brenda put the link. You can put the link in here, or you can go onto your portal and find it. I highly recommend every student and faculty go through that program. It's kind of what I do, because when your brain is faster and more focused, then you're able to make those decisions better. I've worked with a lot of business groups. I've helped them prepare for interviews, because your brain's more massive. So if they've got interviews to do, if they've got studying to do, one of the things the exercises do is stimulate long-term potentiation, which is key to learning and memory. We've had EEGs put on when you do the exercises, get you in the flow state. So there's so many powerful benefits to the brain. So by all means, and again, SUU is the only school in the country that has this. So, and it's free for your students. So definitely they should take this. And if they run through those exercises while they're trying to work through these problems, it'll be much easier. It'll help them read better. They'll get better grades. If they start to feel stressed, there's an exercise in there they can run through for a minute or two before their interviews. So there's a lot of ways that it can really help them in exactly the situation that you're talking about.
So give us just a taste of what you would recommend someone do before a job interview.
Exactly. So what I would definitely do, again, I keep saying, go through one of the exercises. It's all there. You print it out. You're ready to use. The instructions are there. So what that does is it's called like a 1 minute neural primer, and it basically, in a very short time, it's kind of like a reset, refocus, re-speed up of your brain process. And when you go through the exercise, it was designed to be very, very simple. In fact, my daughter, I mentioned, she was 5 when I developed this. And we've learned over the time, and it's why it's so unique. If you give your brain a simple task to do, but it has to work really hard to do it, it thinks it's going to be easy. But in the course of doing that, all these connections in your brain are made very fast and very, very strong. Research from MIT found that this type of stimulation starts to change your brain immediately. And there's a way to time yourself so you can track your metrics. So before a job interview, obviously for any job interview, if it's an important job for you, you want to investigate that company. So many resources now. You want to look up the company, go online. That's one place where AI can come in handy, right? One thing I recommend people is put your resume into your AI if it's chat, and then ask chat, to match up what is needed at the company that you're looking to get hired for, and find out where the matching points are. Because the more prepared you are for an interview, obviously, the better chance you have. If you know what their problems are, if you know where you can help them, that's great in the interview. And then run through one of the exercises, so that you're more nimble, right? More mentally nimble. You can do a better interview. And once you transition into the job, you're going to be a much better place to be successful.
Yeah. So how do the techniques that you use with athletes and in the athletic space, how does that align with, for example, the job interview?
Yeah,
Is it
yeah.
similar?
Yeah, it's a good question. So everything we do has got to flow through our brain, right? And the basic thinking process that we train is break it down, think it through, and execute. And what keeps us on track is focus. So there's always data coming into our brains, and our ability to break it down into different components, think through what we want to do with it, and then execute on it determines our success at that. And so when that's really efficient, it gets into flow state. So you're not even thinking about the decisions. So for an athlete, that translates into being on the court or being in the field, right? One of my favorite clients is Trevor Harris. Right now, he's the highest completion record quarterback in the Canadian Football League at age 39. He just won the Grey Cup. And he says that when that ball snapped, he goes into immediate flow state. So he's got 17 different decisions to make instantaneously, and he's able to tune everybody out and focus specifically on his receiver and make that pass. And if he's getting right, and he also, his brain's quick enough so will throw less interceptions. So that's the same thing as someone going through a job interview, right? You have to stay focused. Where do you want to go? We create something called cognitively primed anticipation, which is really another name for intuition. Because when you can think, when your brain knows what it's going to do or say before it gets there, it gives you a huge edge. Again, one of my, a lot of athletes, but this would apply again to interviews. One of my favorites was an Olympic skier I trained a few years ago. So she's going down the hill at 100 miles an hour. Probably some of your students ski. You've got skiing in Utah. And she said she could ski much faster without falling because she could see the snow conditions further out. Now, what does that mean? Her eyes are the same and the snow is the same. But in pressure situations, we have all these little minor adjustments that we have to make consciously. when you get into that flow state, it's almost like you can look ahead. And all those little minor decisions happen unconsciously when you get into flow state. So if you relate that to an interview, if you're stressed about an interview and you're trying to worry about what you're going to say, if you can create that little bit of buffer, so you're more relaxed and you can anticipate what your interviewer is going to say before he says it, it gives you a chance unconsciously to put the right words together in order for the proper response. So stress goes down and success goes up.
Yeah. So would that be similar? I mean, there's the term flow and in
Yeah,
the zone. How does those terms relate to what you do on a day-to-day basis working with clients?
it's a good question. I get asked that a lot. In fact, I just did a podcast on that. Flows, the term flow has been around for a long time, and there's a lot of work. Kotler is probably the most prolific writer about flow. They talk about flow. The difference for them is that for them, flow is more of a psychological phase you get into. The zone is another name for it. So you visualize all these kind of things. I have a completely different interpretation of that. To me, flow is where you're making decisions fast and unconscious. And people actually experience that when you go through the exercises, which they will. They'll start doing the exercise, they'll start at the top, kind of a little bit slower and conscious because they're thinking about each decision, because that's basically what it is, executive function. They let themselves go and they'll be flowing. They'll go a few rows where they're like not even thinking about it and they're making decisions. And then the conscious will pop in, right? Did I do that right? What's coming up? And it pulls them out. But with practice, you can get in that flow. And so that's people different, define it differently. To me, it's the ability to make decisions without thinking about it. Fast, accurate decisions, really unconsciously. That's how we get from the conscious to the unconscious.
Yeah. I mean I totally agree with you. It's just hard because in some ways we have to let go, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. And so it's funny, one of the most powerful components of this program they'll go through is that it's important not to stop to fix mistakes, which goes against everything we've learned, right? I had a woman once start crying when I told her that. She said, my whole life was told to be perfect. And so your students, right, you're trying to learn a new job or classes, you think you got to get everything right. And that adds stress and it slows you down. When you free yourself not to stop to fix mistakes, and it happens very quickly, what happens is your brain is aware of the mistakes, you get into flow state, and you realize if it's a bad mistake, it's something you can fix later. But you're not doing it now, and it's not holding you back. And that's another thing that helps you get into flow state because you're just flowing along. You're not even thinking about it, but when you're back in check, you've made all those decisions correctly.
So what would you tell someone who leaves an interview and they leave and they're like, "Oh, I said something that maybe was inappropriate or incomplete or maybe sounded stupid." What what would you recommend someone do after that? Just ignore it or should they try and rectify the situation?
It depends. Obviously, if it's a serious part of an interview, they might want to go back and rectify it. But the other thing is just to learn from it, right? Just to learn from it because next time you probably won't make that decision. Just be aware of it. What did I say? This or that. Go back and do some more exercises before the next one. I mean, everything is life is a learning experience, right? So if you have a bad interview, that's not a bad thing. One of the things is we beat ourselves up if things don't go the way we want them to. Everything's a learning experience. So you have the worst interview of your life. Just make sure that you take notes or make sure you know and be aware of it so the next time you won't. By the way, I can pass on a really good tip. A friend of mine wrote a book about this to your students for their interviews. This is one of the most powerful interview techniques I think I've ever heard. So when you're being interviewed, at the end they always say, "Do you have questions for me?" Right? Ask your interviewer, "Can you tell me something you've done in your life that was very meaningful to you?"
Hmm.
Not at all with the interview. And what it does is that person will think about it. They will feel really good about it as they share it with you, and they will associate that feeling with you. So it's a way to make a psychological connection to your interviewer, and he will remember you. He won't forget you then because of that, because of how you remember. It's how we make people feel that's so important. So I think that's an awesome technique. A friend of mine actually wrote a book about, and that might be something that can help your students in their interviews.
Yeah, I agree. I've worked with a lot of MBA students in the past and we practice the interview and I always suggest asks them for advice,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
what you're
yeah,
saying is the same thing. Yeah, people love to give advice, but you can also learn from that advice. I mean, they'll
right.
feel good, but you'll also learn from that. So I think that's a great response. Yeah, I've interviewed people and they'll ask questions like, well, what time does the job start? Or
Yeah,
how much am I
yeah.
going to make? And those are all important things. But yeah, those who can nail the questions, I think really give themselves an advantage. So, John, we've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, I see that.
We've got one question that said, how did you figure out that you are good at processes and process improvement?
So that's a great question because this actually goes all the way back to a time, early 20s. I was actually working in a restaurant, and maybe your students work in restaurants, but it's a great way to make money on the side. And on a Friday night, the owner had to fire the manager. He had me take over. And I thought, I'm great. I know I'm a great waiter. I know all my customers, whatever. So started managed restaurant on Friday. And it turned out that our busboy, who we relied on so much, we didn't even take him. So that's another thing people need to be aware of. Sometimes the people we need the most aren't even the ones we see, right? They're behind the scenes. So he couldn't make it, sent his cousin, didn't speak English. And that was the worst night we ever had. And I was so embarrassed, right? Oh, this would be my time to share. So next night was Saturday, twice as busy. What am I going to do? And I was thinking up late night, praying about it, thinking about it. How can I make sure I'm not a disaster again? And I saw the seating chart on the wall that all restaurants have. It's the way they assign sections to the wait staff. And I realized I could draw a line that would pass by every table on that sheet, one continuous line. And I just had this God wink brainstorm. And so the next night, right before service, I went to the busboy and we put a bus tray one place, a silver tray somewhere else. I always hate when restaurants don't replace your silver, right? We put the water and the coffee. And I said to him, all I want you to do is follow this process all night long. You go, you pour water, you come back, you clear the plate, you come back, you replace the silver, you come back, you clear, you come back, and coffee. So basically, I created a service process that no one had ever done before. And that night, it was the best service we'd ever had because he relied on that process. All the waiters didn't have to worry about it. They could work on give better customer service to their customers. Everything ran smoothly. So that was pretty much the genesis of that. That's that same process I took. I built project management offices. I did all these really large projects, but it was always about focusing on the process. When you focus on the process, you free people up to be better at what they're at. So that's kind of where I got started. And I love and that's really been whether it's the brain processes or operational processes or whatever, you got to find the core processes, make them more efficient, and free people up to be better at what they do.
Yeah. Would you agree that some people are just wired that way though? Like we all know engineers and we're like, okay, they
Yeah.
have an engineering brain and that's how they think. What about those of us who are maybe not wired that way? Maybe we're more free flowing or more less linear. What would you
Well,
say? Or can you make your brain think in a process way?
well, that's a good question. A lot of times, what you want to do is if you're struggling with that inefficiency, just like spend the day writing down everything you're doing. And if you find yourself doing the same thing the same way twice and it's not what you want, then you want to fix that, right? So take a minute. It could be everything from, getting ready in the morning, right? You're not getting out of bed on time, you're not getting your books together, whatever it is. Make a note of the process, write down the process, A to Z, what you're doing, and then examine it. What can you eliminate? What can you combine? Once you define a project, it always starts with definition. Once you have to define the project, the process that you want, and then just repeat that process until it becomes a habit.
Okay.
So you
So let's
can
let's
become
apply let's apply that to the job search. Let's say someone's graduating in April and they don't have a job. Um, how would you apply that technique to finding a job?
the process we just talked about.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, again, meet with your friends. If you're all looking for jobs, what works, what doesn't work. And there's always collective intelligence is always a good way to brainstorm. Again, a lot of people, you put your resume in the chat, talk about the companies you want, what you want, see what comes back. and then you can always change the prompt to be better. If there's a company that you want to apply to, maybe you have a friend that applied there. How did it go? How did it go with the interview? So you always want to capture the information and then write it down at someplace accessible. And
Yeah.
then over time, you can really refine those processes to be better.
Yeah. That's true. I think the challenge a lot of us have is we get stuck and there's only one way. I know I talk to students over the years and they say, I've applied for 1,000 jobs and I'll
Wow.
apply for 1,000 more. And then I saw a study years ago that said, okay, if you apply for just submit resumes over and over, especially in the age of AI, you might have a chance of 10 to 20% of landing a job. And then the same study said if you network,
Yeah. Yeah.
you increase your chances by 70 to 80%. And I thought that just blew me away
Yeah.
that it's not a direct route, but the results that the data show that you'll be more effective if you network.
Right.
And so,
And-
oh, go ahead.
Absolutely. No, I'm saying absolutely. Thanks for saying that. I remember many years ago when I was a project manager trying to get work. I used to go to all the project management events until I looked around and realized everybody else there did what I did and was looking for my job. So I
Yeah,
said, "Why that?" So
yeah,
that's when I started going to business network events. So that's a great, great point. I'm glad you said that. So wherever the kind of job you want, or go hang out with those people,
yeah,
right? And start, even if it's the coffee shop near the office, start to talk to people. And a lot of companies will have those open houses, for example, right? Go to those, ask questions. Even if it's not the job that you want, you're going to learn from the people that you're asking questions of.
yeah. And
Build
I,
those
I think
relationships.
at least the students, a lot of the students I've worked with, sometimes they look at networking as very transactional. Like, okay, I'm going to have a conversation with someone, and if they don't give me a job, then that was a waste of my time.
Yeah,
And I think those of us that are a little on the older side and have had some experiences,
right.
you plant a seed with somebody and a
Yeah,
relationship, and maybe you won't know where that's going to lead. And maybe in 5 years, you'll run across that person and there'll be some connection.
right.
I mean, I've told this story before, but when I worked at Subaru in Indiana, my boss came to a staff meeting and said, we've got some students at Purdue University who would like someone to give them feedback on their capstone project. Any volunteers? And everyone sat there. It was crickets. And I finally, remembering all the teachers I had at SUU, I thought, well, I'll give back, So I raised my hand, finished that job, left the state. 12 years later, I'm back at Purdue University because I made those connections
Yeah,
totally
right,
on a whim, but
right,
I had no intention, but you plant a seed and then that seed can grow. You don't know.
right, right.
So,
Well, and that's the thing, so if you go to those things thinking what you can get, then that's wrong.
right,
What can you give, right? So again, everything's a learning experience. You could
right.
be talking to someone and you could be, oh, I don't want this job, move on. Or you could listen to that person, ask them about their experience. How do you find your job?
Yeah,
And as you said, they will remember you. If you have an opportunity to get their email, just send them an email. Hey, I appreciate the time I spent with you,
yeah,
because they're going to move around to a different job and they're definitely going to remember you.
yeah, that's true. All right, we got a couple more questions. This one's from Taylor. Taylor's always good to ask good questions. What are the most common myths about brain performance that you encounter and how do you address them?
And that's an excellent question because I have to do that a lot, right? So typically, there's two other places people look for brain training, and one are the apps, right? The apps on your phone, Lumosity, Cogmed, and so forth. And the myth is that that's going to change your brain to make a difference. The problem is it'll change your brain to get better at the games from the gamification, but research for years has showed that there's very minimal real world benefits. That's why in this program, you're going to use your eyes, your ears, your mouth, you're going to use your hands. We want the connections from the brain to the real world. That's what really makes the changes. So that's one of the myths. The other myth is, there's a lot of great psychology-based programs, and psychology is really good, but it's not changing the brain. So it does through neuroplasticity, but you can go far beyond that. So again, psychology is the operating system, very effective. I have some good friends. I partner with psychologists, great stuff. But the myth is that that's all you need. NLP or positive mental attitude, all this kind of stuff. Yes, it makes a difference because that's what filters things through. And it does train your brain over time through neural plasticity, but it's not the ultimate way to change your brain to be faster and more focused. That's really where, again, as to you, I commend your school for putting it in there for the students. So those are probably the two main the main myths out there, I would say, around brain training.
Okay, great. We've been encouraged to watch your Apex presentation. Everyone, the links and the I've seen that, and it's worth watching. That link is in the chat. Um, chat or no, Kohler says, if I remember correctly, the paper and program I have access to as an SUU student says arrows level 1. Is there a possibility to gain access to other levels and exercises? And Brenda responded, there are additional levels of training, 2 and 3. They are conducted in person with a coach, usually via Zoom. You can talk to John directly about that. So, and there
Yeah.
is free combat training course for SUU students that's listed there. So tell us more about that course, John. How often do you teach it? Who's in your class?
Well, so the course is actually so that, and this was what, again, give credit to Brendan and SUU. I mean, because everybody was getting such great results when I was there in person. Can we make this a video course? And that's what we did. So we used your studios. They were great. They did all the filming. They did all the video stuff, and so they create and got very talented people there. They are the ones who put the course together, and it's progressive, right? And you can practice and you go through. So that course is basically like a level 1 course I would do in person. And there's great benefits from that. And then, as Brenda mentioned, if anybody, I mean, it could be you, it could be your team, it could be a study group. I can always lead you through more advanced courses over Zoom. I do that all over the world. In fact, I just trained a professional rugby team in Japan over Zoom a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
So, and that's a great thing because we always lead with exercise. So if you do the course, you'll have the neuroprimers you can work on. If I work with you as a group, that's also what we'll do, right? I'll give you some extra exercises you can practice on your own. The goal is always to make the practice a little bit harder each time. That's what makes your brain change so fast.
Yeah. Okay, great. We've got a question from David Benson out of Cache Valley. How do your strategies relate to Dale Carnegie's principles, such as remembering names, listening, dramatizing, etc.? And for those
Yeah.
of our audience who maybe is a little younger, tell us about Dale Carnegie and what his techniques were, and then tell us how it relates to your training.
Well, Dale Carnegie, his famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, was probably written in the 30s. And all
Yeah,
your students should read that book, right? All
yeah,
those truths hold through to today. Now, what he's talking about here is those kind of techniques. So, going back to the model, I think I mentioned before about your brain as a computer, you have 3 different levels of neuroplasticity. Like your computer, you have applications and operating system and the processor. The applications are what we call procedural neuroplasticity, where you repeat something over and over again, you get better at it. Again, that could be throwing a football. It could be practicing his techniques to remember things, right? You're learning those techniques. Dramatizing, interview, like if you want to work with a coach to help you interview, you get better at that because you practice, and that's that level of neuroplasticity. The psychological level is where we talked before about positive mental attitude and psychology. And then what we're doing is we're just training the processor. So everything above it works better. So if someone were to do your course while they were also doing Dale Carnegie's work, they're going to be able to internalize what they're learning from Dale Carnegie better and faster. Because one of the things that the exercises do is they stimulate, it's called long-term potentiation, which opens the brain up to learn better and faster. So that's why it's a great combination to do anything Dale Carnegie does. I recommend your students go through, but if they do the brain training in conjunction with it, it'll be even better.
that's great. How, John, as you've seen like cell phones, iPhones, screen time dramatically increase, especially in the younger population? Well, really, everyone's on a screen these days. How has that changed our brains? What's your observation?
Well, I mean, the research is out there. This latest generation is the first generation in history that will be mentally performing worse than their parents.
Hmm.
And it's totally because of the digital influence. ChatGPT is the worst. I mean, for schools, it's the worst. I saw a teacher the other day talking about someone taking a test using chat to write all the answers. So the couple problems with that. One, the screen time itself is not good. There's studies in South Korea many years ago, they coined the phrase digital dementia. Kids that start on a phone at a young age, like up to the age of 6 or 7, by the early 20s already started to develop dementia because and anyone, if you got friends, you babysit, you got brothers and sisters, if they're younger than 6 or 7, get the phones away because those are the years where we build all the foundational cognitive skills that we use for the rest of our lives. When you at that age, you're learning to walk, you're learning to talk, you're learning to balance, you're learning to relate. Those foundational cognitive skills are really developed by interaction with our environment and modeling from adults. So good role models, but also really important, the more that we engage. You know, the difference between playing with real blocks or playing Minecraft is huge. It might look the same, but Minecraft is just a screen. It's very shallow. It's not good for your brain. Real blocks, you do stacking, right? You can throw it at your brother. He starts crying. I mean, you learn all kinds of things by interacting with those blocks that you'll never learn from Minecraft. But even then, even in school, your students, the easiest thing to do is look stuff up, right? I mean, if you really, really want to work your brain, the next time you have a research paper, go to the library, find the book, right? And do the actual work the old way, because in the course of doing that, you're actually working your brain much harder. It's much better to read a book than on a Kindle because you're holding a book, you're engaging your hands, you're scanning it, you're training your memory. You know, on a digital device, you don't need memory, you just look it up. You read a book. Let's see, what was that guy's name? I think it was 3 pages ago. The more you work your brain, the stronger it gets, which then helps everything in life get better. The more you rely on a digital device to do all that thinking for you, it's easy and fast, but then you're not getting the benefits for your brain.
Yeah, I agree. So how would you encourage a college student to use AI appropriately so it doesn't
Yeah, good
allow our brain to
question.
atrophy?
Good question. You know, I use it as a tool, like I mentioned, with the, like job search and so forth. And I use it sometimes, like I had a meeting earlier with Jim Britt. He's a big, mental, one of the gurus. And so I asked Ted, how does my program work with his program? So there's ways that it can do the analysis. What they don't want to use it for, though, is if they have to write a report or a paper without them doing the work first. If you find yourself coming up with a beautifully, crafted document and you don't know anything that's on it, then you're using AI too much, right? So use it to reinforce what you're already learning. Make sure you can edit it. I mean, we hate to type, if we have chat will do it in 30 seconds, but it's that typing, it's the thinking, it's the writing. At least write it out by hand. There's a lot of neural connections that are formed. If you take a yellow pad and write out all your ideas, and then maybe use chat, or use AI to kind of get the background research for you for that, but make sure that they actually do all the formulation, all the thinking, all the strategic thinking on their own first before they turn it over to an AI.
Yeah, good advice. That takes some self-discipline. Um, we've got another question. What brain training strategies are more helpful for people managing mental health issues who also want to achieve success? That's a good question.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Now, what I've discovered over these years is the core of both of them really is that brain's ability to process. So again, connect with me and can work with you or go through that program. What we find is like people with anxiety, for example, right? They're anxious because they get overwhelmed. Well, then the brain is more efficient, that goes away. A lot of people have low self-esteem or depression, right? We've had great success with depression, lately with autism and ADHD, all kinds of emotional issues we've been able to help by making the brain faster, more focused, because in the process of this, when you do the exercises, you're releasing dopamine and endorphins. It's very important for brain development, making you feel better. We're improving the ability of the brain to operate without stress. I mean, perfect example, a young man so I started certifying other people to do what I do. I certified a psychiatrist, and she referred me to one of her patients who, this guy for 10 years had been on medication. could barely get stuff done. He was so emotionally overloaded. I worked with him the first session, and 3 days later, he emailed me. He said, John, I'm in this position normally where I cannot do things that normal people can do. I had to take the garbage out. I couldn't do it. I ran through your exercises. I took the garbage out. I got everything else I needed to be done that day. We had one more session, and his processing performance had improved about 300%, and he was able to get off all his medications. And now
Wow.
he's back to his job working with kids, which he really loves to do. So there's a lot of very powerful things that the brain is responsible for that we're not even aware of. And when we improve that brain processing power, a lot of these other things resolve.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, we've got another question. Can you share some examples of results you have seen? You kind of did that in that last response, but share some examples of results you have seen in clients where their job performance and productivity, students and academic performance.
Well, and that's a good question too, especially because they're students in job, right? So every student we've ever worked with, they've improved their performance significantly. Probably the best example is that I used to do a lot of ministry work in Chicago with in the inner city high school. The kids were either juniors, they were trying to prepare for their ACT tests, and they were the worst in the school. And so we started working with them. I kind of showed the teacher how to take them through the exercises. Only 10 to 15 minutes a day, 3 times a week. And in 8 weeks, their ACT scores went up 3 full points average. So now they went from lowest to highest in the school. Their grades all went up. And more importantly for that demographic, the emotional issues, the outbreaks, that all went away. So emotionally and educationally, they got better. I've helped, a girl studying for her LSATs, right? So she already was pretty high. Worked with her, she raised her score by 10 points. So like just below the highest you can get for LSATs. For productivity, I have a great kind of a combine. One of my favorite clients again. So Lydia Ann, she was a contractor in the construction business, started her own business. This is in Montreal, so under a lot of pressure. Woman in a male-dominated business, trying to get a certification, so she had to study as well. So overwhelmed she wasn't sleeping. So, and that neuroprimer that this course will teach you to do, that 1 minute neuroprimer, she would run through during the day. She found she was getting more done better and faster every time after she did it. And then 3 weeks later, she emailed me and said, "You're not going to believe this. I've freed up so much time I can start dating again." So that completely changed her life. Plus, obviously, job was getting better. She's better clients. In her negotiations with her clients, she was much more relaxed and more strategic. So probably 20, 25,000 people since the Marine contract that I've helped. And no matter what they do, they always perform better.
So that's interesting. I'm thinking of some of our students who maybe want to go to med school or law school. They're going to take the MCAT or the LSAT. Dental
Yeah.
school, they have to take the DAT. How do these techniques help you perform on a standardized exam like the MCAT or the LSAT?
Well, it's important that they do the exercises while they're studying, right? Because
Okay.
that's what opens the brain up to learn fast, to remember better. And then if they have test anxiety, it probably will go away, but they can always run through, again, it's a piece of paper basically that they take with them. They run through it before they take the test, helps them get into flow state. It's really very powerful for memory as well. We've helped people everything with dementia all the way to students trying to learn. If they suffer from ADHD, which a lot of people do, right, that'll help them overcome their ADHD. So there's a lot of ways that this can help them prepare for those high pressure exams.
Yeah. I know when I was taking a Spanish class at SUU many years ago, the teacher would put on music, calming, soothing music, because his and I think it's been proven in research that stress makes it difficult for us to learn things like
Yes,
languages. And so
right, right.
your brain, I don't know, I'm not an expert, but and it really did work. When we were more relaxed, uh we could improve our language skills versus when we were stressed and tense. It's just hard to learn a foreign language when
Yeah,
your levels are so high, you just can't function. And so Um,
Right.
I would assume that works with testing as well. So
Well, testing, languages is interesting because when I was working with the Marines, I worked with the Marines that are going through a Pashto class, right? They're trying to learn Pashto because they're going to be deploying. And what we did is we mixed up the foreign language words with the English words. And so they were able to very quickly think in the language that they're trying to learn as
yeah,
well.
interesting. Okay, we got another question. How would you help us? Oh, how would you? And this one's from Faith. So Faith, thank you for this question. How would you help a student whose perception is if they don't get this particular job or career, they are not successful? Or essentially, we
Yeah.
all go through that, right? We don't get the job
Yes.
we applied for and we feel like a failure. How do you
Yeah.
move on from that?
Well, and that's more just a faith thing, right? So I think that you have to trust if you didn't get that one, then every closed door opens others, right? So never get discouraged, right? So you have to learn. What did you learn from that? Maybe if you look, maybe you'll find out later down the line that that wasn't the best job for you. What did you learn from the interview? What did you learn for prep? Maybe they wanted some degrees or some information or some experience that you didn't have. Okay, now you have a choice. If you want that job, go get that experience and bring it, or take that experience, know what they're asking for, and for the next job interview, make sure maybe broadened the amount of experience you're bringing into the interview. So it's always a learning experience. You never want to get discouraged if a door closes.
Yeah, continuous improvement for sure. I've got another question. How did the collaboration with the U.S. Marine Corps come about, and what were the most surprising insights about developing combat brain training?
So that was actually one of the best periods of my life. So the whole way this worked was I was at an event the Marines held every year at 29 Palms back then. So this was back during the surge when, again, IEDs were the most destructive weapon. They're killing most of our guys. And at this event, the whole purpose of that event was to bring contractors from around the world, put us through as much as possible about IEDs to see who could come up with an innovative way to save lives. So some guys came up with better radio jammers or better armor. I'm a process guy. You can't find any more process-centric organizations than the Marine Corps, right? So I'm thinking, what can I do to help? And it occurred to me that the guides who had led us around were all Marines who had survived IED attacks. And the story was the same. I started around on one street, one alley. Something told me something was wrong, so I went a different way. But the guys behind me kept going and they got attacked. So why two Marines, two demographics? And these are the same age as your students. I mean, as your on campus students. These are 18, 19-year-old guys. Why does one have better what we call intuition? And that's where I got this God wink that what if I can do for the brain that I do for operations, make it more efficient, use neuroplasticity. The base general, Doug Stone, he got it. Any other general wouldn't have. And so he gave me my opportunity to test this. And so for the Marines, I had a big Department of Defense contract. I mean, a big test we had to do. I had a control platoon of 40 guys, and the guys I had to work with, I chose because they were the worst. So they lost 16 guys to cycle for rampant PDS, 3 attempted suicides, failing most of their pre-deployment objectives. And I embedded with them. I only had 3 months to make a difference. Now, as a consultant, we like challenges, right? They had all these other medical and psychological programs that were there for years trying to find something, but I had only 3 months. So I embedded with these guys, probably one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. I mean, I went through all their training with them for 3 months, being out there for 2 weeks without water. I mean, it was just a great experience. But during that time is when I developed the exercises, one of which is the basis for the one on your SUU program. 3 months later, best performing platoon in the battalion, one of the best ever to go through final pre-deployment training. And then that's how it spread then to Navy SEALs and snipers and pilots and everyone else. So the insights I learned though was that it doesn't really where it came back to me, it doesn't matter what your starting baseline is, right? I mean, again, we had guys who had tried to commit suicide. We had guys who were high performers. Every single person performed better and also together as a unit. So that's where that really came. That was probably the most important insight for me because I was originally just trying to improve their performance. That's where I really realized what a healing impact it could have as well.
Yeah, that's great. We have a comment that someone who uses the combat brain training helps them recall information more easily and quickly, And because of that, it frees the mind to listen more actively,
Yeah.
which is pretty important because sometimes when I'm concentrating on what I'm going to say next, I miss information that's given at the time, at the moment. So
Yes.
that's a good
Right.
point.
Well,
Or,
we're kind of processing almost in two different channels too. And one
yeah.
of the things that first came up when I was working with actually special operations in Tampa, one of the guys said for the first time, when he listens to the radio in his car, he can hear the lyrics and the music simultaneously. Could never do that before, right? Again, we got two channels going at the same time. It's kind of what you're referring to, right? Being able to pay attention while you're also focused on something.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really incredible. I know I played the piano at rest homes and people who couldn't speak, residents who couldn't speak, I would play a song and they would sing
Yeah.
every word. And when the song
Yes.
ended, no
Yeah.
verbal
Right.
activity. And so
Right.
it is a fascinating how our brain works. John, as we wrap up, oh, I've got one more question, and then I want to ask you a final question. How do we eliminate mental fatigue or reduce the sense of tiredness when we are facing demanding situations like tests? Or are there specific exercises you recommend before facing a demanding mental task? That's a great question.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And actually, again, I keep referring to this. So, one of the ways that you can use these exercises is once they become easier, you make them harder. But for mental endurance, it's huge for mental endurance. Just run through it like 3 or 4 times in a row. So now you're making your brain stay focused for 5, 6 minutes at a time, right? While you're making these. And it's a great way to, again, in mental endurance and also to run through before you do anything. Um, so yeah, specific exercises in the course, and obviously they can always reach out to me. You know, they have my email, whatever. I mean, if they, I'm doing the course, but is a way to make it harder, different kind of things, they can reach out to me. The goal is always to make the brain work a little bit harder each time, and that's what improves the connections quickly, and also improves mental endurance.
And then that's helpful. What about the fatigue piece? I'm assuming when you're fatigued, it doesn't do you much good to keep pushing forward, right?
Well, well, unless you can stress that threshold. So one of the things when they go through the exercises, they will find themselves getting mentally tired. I mean, that's what happens, right? I mean, because the brain is working really, really hard, even though you're not aware of it. So a lot of people start yawning after, it's kind of funny. I'm working with them, they start yawning, they apologize. You go, no, no, don't apologize. Your brain's just working really hard. But that then becomes a new baseline, right? So what was exhausting in this time, the next time you do it, it's not going to be exhausting. And that's why you can keep stretching yourself more and more so that you don't get mentally exhausted. And then, the things even in your real life that used to maybe be mentally stressful, they go away because your brain's processing more efficiently.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. This has been great information. Last question. I want to bring it back to your career. How did you transition, or what were the techniques you used to transition from such different areas? What was that common thread that led you through to where you are today? How did you use those experiences from different fields to arrive at your current level of success?
I think part of that was just it's like my quarterback. He says he wants his comfort zone to be stretching his comfort zone, and that's what I think we. So for me, it was always taking on a new challenge. I actually liked moving on to another job or another because it was a new challenge, starting completely over,
Yeah.
right? So I think going back to what that earlier question is, if you lose your job or if you're trying to find another job, you don't get it, you can never think about that as a failure, right? What do you learn from that for the next one? And it gives you an opportunity to go find something else that you might want to do better. And maybe you didn't get it because you weren't prepared enough. Okay, so for this next job, just prepare more. But for me, it's always been that really taking on new challenges in areas I haven't done before, and that's what kind of always motivated me to keep going.
Would you change anything about your career journey?
Probably not. Again, that's where you look back at the dots, right? So I never in my wildest dreams when I was consulting think that I'd be, talking to you here, right? Or training Navy SEALs. I never would have thought that. But looking back, it always makes sense, right? How it
Um,
went from step to step.
Well,
So
John, thanks for your time today. Thanks for everything you've done for SUU and its students, and we look forward to learning more about how we can train our brains to achieve the results that we want, both in school and our careers. Um, just a reminder for those of us who come most weeks, next week is spring break here at Southern Utah, so we will not be having a Friday Career Connections. But in 2 weeks, our guest will be Chris Powell, who's a pilot, a helicopter pilot. We're excited to hear from
cool.
him. This will be a completely different area than we've had in the past, so it'll be fun. SUU has a wonderful aviation program, and so Chris is a an alum of our aviation program, so it'll be fun to hear from someone who flies helicopters and airplanes. So
Yeah.